So why do they do this to people that they say they love and care about?
Because a lot of people say, he says he loves me. How can he do this? He must not love me. And I'm like, slow down, sister. He said he loves you. You're gonna have to buy that. Here's the problem. This thing he's selling is love. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. It's like you go to a bar, someone give you a glass of wine, you're like, what the hell is this?
It could just be grape juice.
It could just be grape juice, right? So, in some ways when narcissists are selling love, it's sort of like the grape juice of wine. It's something very superficial. It is something that lacks the depth that a healthy, intimate relationship has. It tends to be what we call very instrumental. And in that way, narcissists view human relationships as conveniences. So in other words, it's like this cup. Right now, I like this cup because it's going to give me what I want to drink, okay? Very convenient, and I'm actually quite focused on it now. In 10 minutes, I'm not going to give this cup a second thought because I don't need it. That's how narcissists treat people. This is a problem all over the world. People are suffering.
Yeah.
Like, this is a rallying cry for me. This isn't okay. So I've really devoted my career at this point. And I think only people who have survived narcissistic abuse sometimes get it that strongly, like, I get it. And then sometimes the survivor of narcissistic abuse gets called out for being dismissive, for being mean. I mean, they really do. So it's almost like they're re-abused, re-traumatized. But a narcissist is a person who has a long-standing pattern of not having empathy, being very grandiose, being arrogant, being entitled. They tend to be very superficial. They're constantly seeking admiration and validation. They cannot tolerate frustration or disappointment, and under those conditions, they often explode in these big rages. They tend to be very dishonest. They can often be very controlling. Now, to get a holistic view of a narcissist, though, not all of them look like the big, pumped up, grandiose, like, here I am, I'm so great. There's also a flip side to narcissism, which is that very covert, vulnerable side. And these are people who they tend to be very resentful, sullen, angry, mopey. They feel the world's not fair. They feel the world's not just. I never got my chance. I was one of the great ones. That can actually sometimes be a very dangerous form of narcissism because they're sort of sullen and brooding, and they feel like life was never right to them. They often walk around with very much a victim mentality. Those are the two faces of narcissism. And in the same narcissist, you can have both. It really depends on how their life is going. But in its macro, whether you're vulnerable or whether you're grandiose, both forms of narcissism are really about that lack of empathy, that entitlement, that arrogance. Somehow they're too good for you, they're too good for the world, they can't be bothered with other human beings, they just don't care. In narcissistic personality, here's where it gets tricky. A lot of people with these patterns have no impairment. They're getting promotions, they're getting the girl or the guy, everyone's thinking they're so cool, I want them at my party. They're often very financially successful. So as far as they're concerned, they're killing it.
Right.
So where's the impairment? And distress are saying, I ain't got no problem, it's your problem, it's their problem, it's the world's problem. They defend themselves, they rationalize everything, they compartmentalize. The world almost exists for their convenience. So they're not distressed. And depending on what index you use, they're not impaired. Now, there's nowhere in our diagnostic manuals we diagnose someone because they make other people unhappy.
Right.
That's not built into the model.
Yeah, just because you're a jerk doesn't mean you get a diagnosis.
That's right. We do not diagnose jerks, okay?
Yes.
So but the fact is there is no pill. And I think that people they're so hurt. They want this to go away. So narcissistic personality disorder, we only see it in maybe 1 to 5% of people. Narcissism, I'm willing to tip that number over 50% at this point. Okay, so narcissistic abuse is not a well-articulated phenomenon. Those of us who do talk about it haven't even come up with a standardized definition. To me, it is a pattern of psychological neglect, invalidation, dehumanization that causes significant stress or psychological harm or distress to the individual who is the subject of such abuse. And this abuse, what it's characterized by, is chronic invalidation, lack of compassion, lack of respect, lack of what we call mutuality, back and forth, and a sort of a cold indifference on the part of the narcissist to the other person. People who are on the receiving end of narcissistic abuse at the most severe, some of these clients, I think they look like they almost have post-traumatic stress disorder.
Right.
At the less severe end, you see people who are full of self-doubt, anxiety, they don't feel good about themselves, they worry a lot, they feel hopeless, they feel helpless more than anything else. And all of those patterns make them less efficient, and less able to get through their day-to-day lives. It hurts their relationships, it hurts them at school, it hurts them at work. So if anything, while the people who are narcissistic aren't experiencing the distress and impairment, the people who are experiencing their abuse are. So, in some ways when narcissists are selling love, it's sort of like the grape juice of wine. It's something very superficial. It is something that lacks the depth that a healthy, intimate relationship has. It tends to be what we call very instrumental. And in that way, narcissists view human relationships as conveniences. So in other words, it's like this cup. Right now, I like this cup because it's going to give me what I want to drink, okay? Very convenient, and I'm actually quite focused on it now. In 10 minutes, I'm not going to give this cup a second thought because I don't need it. That's how narcissists treat people.
I get that. Really well said.
And so that's really why it is, that's sort of the core of why it happens. It's just this disregard, and they just don't get it. But they think they love because they may pay the rent. They might buy you gifts. They may take you out to dinner. I took you on vacation. I came to your sister's wedding. What more do you want from me? And so as far as they're concerned, that's love, which is why I've always said on around the 10th date, you need to pull your love contract out and say, sweetheart, this is what love is to me. And if you ain't buying, that's fine. But I really do think that people need to be clear about how many people are going to walk around saying, my definition of love is actually quite superficial, and this is the weight you need to stay at, and this is how I expect things to be, and I promise you this much in rent, this much in stuff, this much in gifts. That's kind of gross and transactional, but for narcissists, a lot of their relationships are often quite transactional.